one way you can use the recording when we're doing this is, as you listen to it, since you won't have the visual, you could try to either air write or actually write on scratch paper which one you hear. And if you can't write it that fast, you can use the pause button a lot. But that would be a good way to practice. So this one is goo. Yes. Goo. Ba. She. Good. Go. E. Me. Go. Su. E. Me. New. Yeah. Po. Zo. G. O. Yo. Zoo. Go. Go. Yes. Go. To. So. Yes. This one is so. De. Ze. Lu. O. Li. Now, sometimes in handwriting, this one can also get confused with so, but in print, it's not a problem, right? It's very clearly skinny and upright.
Walk back a little further.
Oh.
Like, really seeing it. So.
Okay. Yeah, you know, it would help if you could come in a little bit, and then I could center myself on the main group. You all right?
Go.
Can everybody see it now? Because I'm trying to stay within reach to put it down, too. Boo. Ye. No.
Ha. Ha. Na.
He.
Ne.
There you go. Which one is that? G or zoo?
Zoo.
Zoo. Yeah. Okay.
Sa. Sa. Ni. Se. Re. Da. En. Sa. Fu. Ga. He. Ya. Ga. Chi. Ki. Ha. Pu. Chi. Te.
Te.
Oops.
Yes. Te, not chi.
Ho. Su.
Su. Yes.
Wan. Be. Ha. Ma. Ka. Ke. Pi. Yo.
You. Yes, this one's you.
He.
G. The other G.
Ho. U. Ge. Go. U.
And okay, and what I did here is I pulled out just these, even though they're not transparent, maybe a side-by-side comparison will help some people. So, let's put them all up here. I'm just putting them in the random order that they happen to show up in. Okay, so can you identify them? for example, if we put so and we side by side, can you see what I'm talking about? The arc here versus the arc here versus the arc here. You see narrow, medium, wide there? And if we put Su and Zu next to Shi and Ji, and of course Zo, of these, Zo is the only one that takes a 10-10, so that's automatic, right? It can't be an N or a Li, because those don't take 10-10, right? Those are impossibilities. Yes? So that one should help. And then, can you see here to here versus here to here? The difference in width. Some people find it easier to see this distance here is shorter compared to that one.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So the three lines starting points are closer to one another, and it's more open on the bottom, right? And Shi, the three lines starting points are closer to one another on the side, and it's more open in the top. Does that make sense? Okay. And another way to think of it is because these lines sort of lay down a little bit, and they all do kind of go in order, you're kind of going left, 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 all from the left to the right. See that? And these, because they're all sort of top down, you're kind of starting close to the top for all three of them on two. Does that make sense?
I think that's kind of what confused me with the N and the So, because I was, because you were talking about like the clockwise and the counterclockwise, and I was kind of looking at that with those two, and it looks like the opposite of what I would.
Yeah, well, a lot of people want to make So and Shi similar because they're both S's, so you kind of expect them to be written alike. So, in terms of shape, belongs with Su and Zu in terms of relative shape. If you look at which two, this one kind of splits the difference between these two, doesn't it? Okay, and then if you compare next to Shi and Ji, this line kind of splits the difference between those two. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think it'll be easier when we get those transparency overlays. We can play around with it in more ways. Right.
I was going to say, well, the way that I was remembering it was she has 3 marks and it sounds like 3.
Okay, Shi 3, okay.
And has 1.
Okay, 1, okay.
I sort of combine them to like try and remember. So like Sheen, I just think like Sheen.
Okay,
And
there you go,
helps me-
Shin, yeah, which is a Japanese word.
Yeah, that helps me remember that those two.
Shin
together.
and Jin are both real words. Okay, Jin as in Nihonjin, right? And Shin as in Shinkansen. To use an example that you're familiar with, Shinkansen bullet train. Some of you know that word. Shin is also one of the pronunciations for the word heart, kokoro. And then Su and So, I can't think of a particular word, Sotsu. Well, okay, yeah, Sotsu, Sotsugyo. Sotsugyo means to graduate. So once you get these, you'll have graduated katakana, right? Sotsu. So that's a way to remember those two as a pair. Sotsu. Okay, so that might help if remembering which two are one is she and which one is suit, once people get the hang of how to differentiate them, usually they remember those two, but then it's so and that people want to put backwards because they want so badly for the two S's to be the ones that are alike, and they're not.
So is it acceptable if we, for suit, we put the first two stroke orders as like vertical? Is that right?
Very, yeah, I mean, very close to vertical. When I handwrite them, sometimes it comes out more vertical. So, yeah. You don't want it to go past the vertical in the other direction. But if it's nearly vertical, that's probably a good way to differentiate it in your handwriting. You know, and if I'm just writing it fast, you know, yeah, she and suit look very different when I'm writing fast because I do make my suit almost vertical and my she has a huge check if I'm writing really quick. So, yeah, I think in some ways handwriting can be the easier way to differentiate them. Fonts that don't do a good job of differentiating can be really annoying. But even the worst of them, usually at the very minimum, this shorter line tilts one way or the other more. If it's more vertical, that's so. If it's laying down closer to the horizontal, it's And sometimes you just have to look for examples of both in the same script to make the comparison and figure out which one's which, at least until you get used to them. And of course, context helps. If you recognize the word and reading it with the other sound doesn't make any sense whatsoever, then that's clear, right? If it's starting with, you know, this, or, you know, if it's starting with that, it's got to be so, because I don't know of any words that start with right? You know, if it's going to start with an N sound, it's probably going to be with na, ni, nu, ne, or no, right? Why would they start with It's not even pronounceable in Japanese to put and then the, you know, something else at the start of, you know, there are no words like that. Huh? Yeah. Okay, so does that help some with the katakana? Okay, so you guys ready to try names in katakana? Yay. So, let's see, what am I looking for here? Okay, do we have Dylan still, or did we lose Dylan?
He's not been here all this week.
Yeah.
I think he sounded pretty sick last time he was here.
Oh, okay. Because I've still got his test, because he didn't come to pick it up, so I just don't know if I should be expecting him to come back next week, or if
Did anyone
he's
see him in
gone for good.
the Japanese lab?
No, I checked the student email and he was still on there. I'm not sure if they dropped you, if you withdraw from the class.
Well, if he hasn't officially withdrawn yet, but he's planning to, then he wouldn't be dropped yet. So, it depends on whether it's been made official or not. Okay, I'm just, I'm gonna write some stuff up, and you guys start seeing what you can decipher. Okay? Some of these are gonna be easy, and some of these are gonna be hard.
That's me.
Okay. And I'm trying to remember, did we go through the ones with combinations at all last Okay, you may need to do that first. So if you can't read all of these, don't worry about it yet. Space here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the ones with diacritical marks and combinations first. Okay, so the basic combination ones are the same as the hiragana combinations that you already know. Okay, but they do have some extra ones in katakana. So we're gonna, and they're all sort of mixed in together in this pack. So, you, yes.
Kyo.
Pyo.
Yeah.
Nya.
You.
You.
Kyo.
Pyo. Good.
Kya.
Pya. Pya.
You.
You. Yes.
Choose.
Chu. Special one, sweet or tsi, yeah. So for example, tsitsi fly, tsi, that kind of a sound. So some of these apparently are more for the purposes of transcribing things from other languages, not necessarily things that came out of English. We don't deal with tsi a lot in English, but it's common in some languages.
Cha.
Cha, yes.
Jo.
Jo, yes.
Ja.
Ja. Okay. Shu, yeah. You, yeah. Kyo.
Kya.
Yeah.
Myo.
Myo.
Yeah.
You.
Yo.
Byo. Good.
Myo.
Mu. Yeah.
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 Yo.
Yo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Q.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Myo.
Myo. Special one. D. D. There's no other way to get the sound D, right? You can get G, you can get chi, but how else are you supposed to get D? So they made one up to do D. So you can do words like DVD. Okay. So, and again, not necessarily an English sound, but one that apparently Japan needed for something. Yeah, se, same thing, se. Cho, good. Ju, yeah. Sho, Q,
Yeah.
yeah. W-O in Japanese, wo, wo, okay? We, same thing, we. Full, yeah, full. So again, if you want any F sound other than fu, you've gotta do a weird combo, right?
Is that for
So
like
full,
pork?
like folku, yes, or full form, you know, things like that. Feet, yeah, again, feet. There's no other way to get it. You've got heat, but no feet until you create it. Feet. Fa, same deal, right? And jet, yeah, same thing, right? There's ji, there's jaju jo, but there was no jet until they came up with it. So, for example, somebody like Jessica would be out of luck without this one, right? Wed. So, same thing. W-E sound, wed. There it is. That's the closest Japanese can get. Very special character. Relatively new invention. Clues. Vu. Yes, it's vu. This is how they render a V sound. For the Japanese people who can actually pronounce a V, which isn't everyone, they take an U, which is not normally gonna take a 10-10, right? So it's obviously gotta be a new, modern created character, right? Put a 10-10 on an U, and you get vu. Okay? Then, of course, if you want to change that from vu to V plus some other vowel sound, you can do va, like that. And by extension, you can guess that the other ones do the same thing, right? So you've got va, you've got ve. This one's fe, yeah. De, and a U is dew, as in mountain dew. Yeah. This one is tea, yes, as in iced tea. Okay. Check, as in check, which could be, you know, asking for the check, or talking about geography, Czech Republic, check. Sa. Again, don't know of an English example for this, but shed, as in chef, for example. Huh? Shed. No, seredi. You wouldn't need it for that, but chefu, for example, or a girl named Shetty, right? Which could be Shelly or Sherry, because there's no way to differentiate L's and R's. Sha. Yeah. Gyo. V. There's that V again with a small E, so V. And vo, as in voto, vote. Things like that. Okay?
It's also a common Vietnamese.
Okay, vo, okay, cool. Yeah, so that's how you would render that name. If you've got a friend with that name, now you can help them. Yeah. Yeah. So does that help decipher some of those? So now you've got an idea of what to do. So let's go ahead and read some of these. So this is Julian. The dash. Does anyone know what the dash is? A long vowel, yes. So in hiragana, normally we would just write the vowel sound again, right? But in katakana, because it is dealing with loanwords, sometimes you would have a weird situation like this with two ahs next to each other, which looks odd. And it's also just not as convenient to write. So extended vowels in katakana are usually rendered with just the hyphen symbol. Okay, so, and the reason I wrote your name this way is because if you leave that out, it comes out Julian, which could sound like the guy's name Julian instead of Julianne. Since you put more emphasis on the an in English, we put the stress there. Giving it an extended vowel puts the stress there. Okay, that's the closest equivalent to stressing the syllable that you can do in Japanese. It's just making it a longer vowel. So, Julian, like that. If you don't like that version of it, if you don't like that pronunciation, you can always tweak it. But that's going to get you about as close as I can think of to how it gets pronounced in English. And, you know, if you delete that, you end up sounding like, well, some people might not know if you're a guy or a girl from the name alone, you know. Although a lot of Japanese people aren't that familiar with Western names anyway, and won't have a clue until they meet you. Okay, so what about this one? Koru. That's really easy, right?
Yeah.
And also, since it's a traditional name and a biblical name, there are more Japanese people who are going to recognize it. You know, very, very few Japanese people are Christian. I think it's less than 1% of the Japanese population is actually Christian, but a lot of them are still familiar with the very common names like that. So, Diran, yeah, who isn't here. Odori. That's one possible rendering of your name. There are other options, but I think that's about as close as you're going to get phonetically. Okay, Odori. Desani. Yes. Notice there's no TH sound in Japanese, so the soft THs get rendered as S's, and the hard THs get rendered as Z's, usually. So like the movie titled The Ring, that was actually a Japanese film. The Japanese title is Zaringu. Okay? Kori. Yeah. And you want to make sure you get your extended vowel here, because kori is ice. But you're kori. Okay? Jaretto. Jaretto. That's, again, that's as close as we're going to get. And the small tsu, again, helps with getting the emphasis in the right place and getting the final T to sound closer to what you want it to sound like.
How do you determine,
Whether or not to put a small tsu or
no, just the final character?
usually in T's, if it's a final T, it usually goes to to. If it's a final of anything else other than a T, usually it goes to an U sound.
So if I was doing my full name, would I use a new sound?
Tell me your full name.
Jared Salatino.
Okay, Salatino, well, that ends in a vowel sound, Salatino.
No, but I mean, if I'm doing my full name, would I use two?
No, you're not gonna, no, because two is hard to pronounce in Japanese, right? It comes out as tsu.
Or
Yeah.
any other tag.
So jaretsu is what it would come out to. That doesn't sound right. That sounds like you've got an S on the end of your name, which you're not adding, you're not making it Jarrett's, are you?
No, that's correct. Okay.
Yeah, so,
Wait.
yeah.
It's Jared, right?
No, it's Jarrett,
Oh,
right?
Jared.
He's got a T, not a D. Yeah, so Jarrett.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, that's the easiest one ever, right? Ken.
Ken.
Yeah, in fact, Ken is also short for a number of Japanese names because there are common Japanese names like Kenichi, Kenji, Kenjiro. I can think of half a dozen possible Ken names in Japanese. So that's actually a common and popular choice for families who have a Japanese American son, because if they want his name to work in both languages, they can pick something like Ken or Kenji or Kenichi, and in Japan he can use the Japanese version, and in America he can be called Ken, and nobody has to worry about being unable to pronounce his Japanese name. So, let's see.
Shantaru.
Shanteru. Shanteru. So again, there's no way to end it with an R or an L. There's no way to even tell whether it is an R or an L, is there? Shanteru. That's about as close as we're going to get. Can you read it?
Jamie.
Hi, Jamie. Yeah, so again, by putting the hyphen there, it's giving you the stress on the J part. Otherwise it would sound like Jamie if you put the stress here. Or if you just left it out, it would be Jemmy, which sounds a little different, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, Jimmy would be Jimmy, but Jemmy still sounds like your nickname was, like your English name was Jem, and Jemmy is your nickname or something, you know? So Jamie gets you closer. Sierra and Burando. So again, there's no avoiding the vowels inserted between your consonants.
I think it works pretty well though.
Yeah,
You
it
can
does.
understand it pretty
Yeah,
well.
Burando. So, any questions about any of those?
Would, okay, for mine,
Uh-huh.
I really need the, stress on the me, because I feel like the emphasis is more on, like, veg,
Okay. So, Besani.
based on.
Besani. Do you prefer it that way? Besani?
That's what I was guessing it was, so I was
Okay.
just wondering.
I'll say them both for you. Tell me which one sounds better to you. Besani? Besani.
First one, that's it.
Okay. So, you can write it that way.
I was just,
Yeah, and that's the thing, with all of these names, this is just my best guess, but if that pronunciation doesn't sound the best to you, you can tweak it. You know, but generally speaking, Japanese versions of people's English names are based more on the pronunciation and how you want Japanese people to say it, rather than on trying to recreate the spelling of your name, because the spelling may or may not have that much correlation to the pronunciation, right? You know, English has a lot more variation in its spelling than Japanese does. So I try to do it phonetically, and then if you're not crazy about that pronunciation, we can tweak it. Okay? And if anybody has like a middle name or a nickname that they want to know how to render because they'd rather go by that in Japan, you can ask me about that too. You know, I've had some people who've said, well, my first name sounds funny in Japanese. How does my middle name come out? You know? So some people have a nickname that they really like. So what am I looking for here? So you guys ready to try some words? Let's try. So,
America.
hi, America. See it? Everybody can read this one now, right? And hi, business, which means business. You remember the majors from last chapter?
Hawaii.
No, that would be only three. Hawaii. This is Hawaii. Highway.
Highway.
Yeah, Highway 95. Anybody drive on that one lately? Highway 1. Yeah, you probably got some of these last Kurisumasu, right? Or maybe on your Tanjobi, right? Presento. astrology or astronomy?
Venus.
Venus. Alright. I know we've got at least one musician in here. Duetto. Yeah. Party. Just what it sounds like. Hi, Philippine, as in Philippine Jin or Philippine Go. Pen, what some people are writing with right about now, right? Yeah. Personal name, right? Could be American, could be, yep. Could be lots of languages, right? Chinese and Korean both have we as a possible name. Yeah?
Pizza.
Pizza. Lots of people's favorite food, yes? Yeah. Not from English.
Bread.
Yes, from Spanish. Pun.
Actually, Portuguese was
Portuguese.
Along
It may have been-
Castilla.
It's in Spanish.
Yeah, it's the same
There's a
in
lot of
both, but I would guess that it may have been Portuguese.
I remember it specifically being Portuguese because Portuguese emissaries brought over confeito as
Yeah.
confeito and casutera as pan de Castilla.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and yeah, the Portuguese were the first Europeans to get to Japan. So it makes sense that pan would be from the Portuguese because they probably brought bread with them on that trip.
That
Each
series
has
has
a shogun.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking about it. It's a good show. Gimli's
Yeah.
in it from Lord of
Yeah.
the Rings.
yeah, and what's interesting is Shogun is a fictionalized account, of course, of that time period, but there are just as fictionalized accounts done by Japanese filmmakers and such who didn't bother to change any of the historic names, but the Shogun writer actually changed, like Tokugawa, he changed it to Toranaga and
Yeah.
stuff like that. He changed some of the historic names so that he would have artistic license to do what he wanted with the story. Japanese authors don't even worry about that. They just do what they want with the story anyway.
It was a good one.
On the subject of words being brought over from other countries, NHK's in Japanology has like a great episode about like
Yeah.
confections in Japan and how a lot of those words and like words for techniques and tools got brought over.
Okay, cool.
There's also another fun fact that I read is that in almost every other language, the word for pineapple is bananas, but here it's pineapple.
Okay. Interesting.
Ananas. I am pineapple. It's the one French thing I know.
Yeah.
Je suis ananas.
Nice. Okay.
I'm gonna use that for sure.
Okay, and this one of course is
Car.
ka, which means
Car.
car, yes. Yeah, any of the sounds tend to just get translated to in Japanese, so think Boston accent and you're halfway there. Yeah. The most important katakana for you to know before you get to Japan.
Toilet.
Yes, toilet is one of the standard words for restroom in Japan. So if you know this, then you can find your way to the facilities when you need them. Okay. Meru. Email. It's actually specifically email. They have an older word with kanji to it for snail mail, but meru is obviously a modern invention, so it's got katakana. That's been the case with most technology-related words in the modern era. There are a few exceptions, like denwa has kanji to it, and even keitai denwa, which is a cell phone. It's literally satellite phone. But most techno words are katakana, and I'd say probably the vast majority of them are from English. Home. This is not what you think it is. It's not home. It's actually short for platform, which I think this predates the invention of the full construction for an FO sound. So it's actually platform as in train platform. When you're taking a train somewhere, the area where you're standing right in front of the tracks, and then the train comes up, and then you get on that concrete where you were waiting for the train is called the platform. And in Japan, they call it home. Okay. Some of you are too young for this one.
Why?
Hi. Wine. Right.
What, something that sort of confuses me is, like why in some cases would you use like the smaller vowel and then some you would use like a larger one for like if you're doing a.
It depends on whether you're pronouncing this, the first vowel or not. So this is wine.
Okay, so it's like an
So,
I.
yeah. But in some of the others, like feet, you're writing the foo for the sake of the F part, but you don't want the oo in there. You want it to be fee. So that's why you write the E part smaller. And that large then small indicates only use the consonant from the large piece and attach the vowel from the small piece. Does that make sense? If you write the vowel full size, then it's saying use the consonant and the vowel from the first piece as well as the vowel from the second piece. So if you wrote fu, e, that's hui. But if you write fu, little e, that's fi. That's the differentiation. Okay? The same thing is true even with hiragana. If you write kyo versus kyo, right? This, you're fully pronouncing the ki and the yo as two separate pieces. This, you're running them together and you're deleting the e sound from the ki and you're just keeping the k and the yo, kyo. Make sense? Question?
Is this how we would distinguish between hyaku and hayaku?
Well, partially, because hyaku is he, ya, he, small ya, hyaku, right? So you know that the h plus the ya, hya, right? Hayaku is actually ha, ya, ku. It's not hiyaku.
That's right.
That actually, hiyaku is a different word. Hiyaku means to get sunburned. And hayaku is quickly, and hyaku is 100. So they're three entirely different words. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that help? Okay, so
Yeah,
this one is,
So,
yeah,
the answer is essentially yes, I just had the wrong word.
okay.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so yeah, if you're differentiating between these two, hiyaku, hyaku, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, like Kyo and Kyo. So like Kiyoshi is a name, Kyoshi is an instructor. Kiyoshi is a person, like a person named Kiyoshi. Kyoshi is a teacher. Peiji. Page, yeah, as in 90 peiji would be page 90. Yeah. Ski. Anybody like skiing? Ski. Okay, snowboard. Hi.
What about like, it's probably not gonna come up, but has the word page as in a pager translated at all, or is it continued in use at all?
I don't think anybody in Japan has them anymore because they've all got cell phones.
They still use them in hospitals.
Okay, if I had to guess, the name for that would probably be Peija rather than Peiji. That's my best guess.
Okay.
suits. Suits, right. As in Western business suit. Suit. Boru is not what you think. It's not a bowl. It's a ball. Yes. Boru. So, basketball, volleyball, football, baseball. Those are all sports in katakana. Right? Cafe.
Oh,
Cafe.
gosh.
Cafe. From, yeah, cafe, as in, place to go get coffee and cake. Right. Speaking of which, cake. Something to eat at the cafe, which might have been cooked by shefu. 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 Yes. Asia. Asia. Yes, Asia. Noto.
Notebook.
Yes, it's notebook. It's the shortened form of notebook, but they use noto now. If you mean taking notes, they write memo. They say memo for that. Most of you have eaten this.
Ramen.
Hi, ramen. This originally had kanji to it. It's from Chinese, but the kanji for it are a pain in the neck to write, so most people write it in katakana these days. Even the ramen shops themselves, often their sign will be in katakana rather than the kanji, because nobody likes those particular kanji in Japan anymore. Kare.
Curry?
Yes. Kare. And just like in this country, ethnic food isn't necessarily authentic in Japan. It might be the Japanized version. So like kare in Japan comes in mild, medium, and hot, and even their hot isn't as hot as India. Hi, T-shirts. Some of you are wearing one. Yeah, T-shirts. Yes, and they really do sometimes write the T this way, and sometimes they write it the other way with the te, small e, T-shirts. Where do we live?
Florida.
Florida. Hi, Florida. And one of our neighbors,
Mexico.
Mexico. Hi, Mexico. Mexico. I know, that's kind of awkward to pronounce, but there you go. Hi, Italia. Hi, Italia. Hi. Yeah, Italia. Okay, this is a fun one.
Solo.
No.
I have no idea.
What? Handsome. Handsome, yes.
That makes a lot more sense.
Handsome. Yeah, Han Solo would be Han
I-
Solo. Yeah, that one's actually really easy to
Yeah, I
remember
was
in
like,
katakana.
I don't know.
Handsome. Handsome. Okay, this one is totally counterintuitive. Shichu. Shichu. No. It's something you cook. It generally has meat and veggies.
Stew.
Yes. Shichu is stew. Believe it or not. Again, you can tell that it predates some of these made-up combinations, because if you were writing it now, you would find a different combination instead of chew for the end of that word, wouldn't you?
I know all the food ones.
You're all set. You won't go hungry in Japan. If you know what this is, you won't be thirsty. Anybody know Spanish? I'm told it's a lot more like the Spanish word for this thing than the English word. It's also more like the spelling.
Oasis.
Yes, oasis. Oasis. It's more like the spelling and the Spanish pronunciation than it is the English pronunciation of it. This is an alternate spelling for something we already covered.
Business?
No. Venus.
Venus.
Venus, yes. Remember I told you about the V's being sort of relatively recent? Before they had V's, every V sound got rendered as a V. And even today, some people prefer the B spellings on certain words. And certain words, it's the standard still. So terebi is TV, but the B spelling is still the standard. A few more. Yes, or full food. Something to write with, something to eat with, not write with, something to eat with. Check food, right? Something you ask for when you're done eating at the restaurant. Check food. Also check mark, check food. Sometimes use it for that. Or Czech Republic, Czech cuisine. Right. As in Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. Pepsi. Bobato. Robert, yes, like in our book, Bobato. Not to be confused with Roboto. Coffee. Coffee, again, another one that predates the invention of the phi sound. So kohi was as close as they could get back then. Juice. Hi, juice is another fun one.
Salad.
Do they actually have orange juice in a soda pop bottle?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I've
Wait.
never seen that. Is
So
that,
orange juice is in like a glass bottle?
Sometimes,
okay.
Really?
yeah.
I've seen them at Starbucks in glass bottles, but that's
Yeah.
not Starbucks.
Yeah, Japanese vending machines have all kinds of crazy things that you'd never expect to find
Vending
in.
machines with rocks in them.
Yeah, they have vending machines with hot drinks and cold drinks. They have vending machines with all kinds of stuff. Beer, too.
Underwear vending machine?
I've heard of those, I've never seen one.
Okay, since we're going there, is that like a stereotype? Like, are,
There
this-
really
this is
are
gonna
a
sound
lot-
rude
no.
racist. Are Japanese like shocked when they see a black person?
Not,
I've seen videos where like a guy like took off a mask and he was.
yeah, no,
That's fair.
it's not as out of the ordinary anymore as it used to be, but if you go into the countryside, you might be the darkest person you're gonna see all week.
Well, I just
You
watched,
know.
I just watched a video,
Yeah.
the girl
It-
who won Miss
Yeah.
Japan is half black, so.
Yeah, well, and people who are biracial and people who are from other parts of the world and not Asia are more and more common, especially in the big cities. But you go out into the boonies and you find people who have never met somebody who wasn't Japanese.
Wow.
Yeah,
The boondocks.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
yeah, now granted, this was a long time ago, but when I lived in the small town where I was teaching English for a year after college, I was one of only 2 non-Japanese people in the entire town, and I never met the other one. She was married to a Japanese man, she had 3 children that she was raising as Japanese, and she didn't want any contact with the only other white person in town. Yeah. And so she and I never actually met the whole time I lived there, which was a little over a year.
Wow.
But, yeah, I was the only non-Japanese person some of those children had ever met in person. I knew lots of elementary school kids in the neighborhood where I was living, in the little elementary schools that I visited as part of my job. Some of them were so fascinated because they'd never seen somebody with my skin tone, my eye shape, my hair texture and color. And my friend 2 towns north of where I was, which was even more remote, more rural, she had curly red hair and blue eyes.
Oh.
And apparently, you know, the kids all loved her because they were just so fascinated. And of course, she had very fair skin. And they were just totally fascinated by her. And one time she was tutoring a little boy, and apparently he had never noticed her blue eyes until then. And because they were sitting right next to each other, he suddenly noticed, and you have blue eyes. Why are your eyes blue? In Japanese, of course, he was like 6.
Oh my god.
But a lot of the little guys had never met anybody of a different race.
That's cute.
So, yeah. The kids I feel sorry for are the biracial kids growing up in Japan who don't have anyone else
Yeah, I couldn't.
to relate to and don't understand, why does everybody treat me so different?
I
You
also,
know?
I also heard there's a lot of like teachers and people at school assuming you're an immigrant, and like even though you like have been speaking Japanese all your life and you've been eating Japanese food all your life, if you have like a specific preference for something, they'll be like, oh, you just haven't got the taste for Japan yet, or
Yeah.
something, even though you've been living there your whole life.
Yeah, there is still some very Japan-centric thinking
There's
in,
a
especially the rural areas.
There's a documentary on,
Yeah.
I guess there was a large Japanese population in Brazil for a
Mhm.
while. And there was a big movement amongst the Japanese community to go back to Japan.
Ah,
And they dealt with a lot of racism.
yeah,
And they ended up in essentially like ghettos.
yeah, yeah. Even within the native Japanese population, there are minority groups. They're still Asian, but they're minority groups. The Ainu people are the indigenous people of Japan who've gotten pushed all the way into the northernmost parts of Japan, mostly the rural parts of Hokkaido. They're discriminated against still. The Burakumin are a sort of untouchable caste within Japanese society. They're ethnically Japanese, but they were the people who historically dealt with butchering meat and working leather in a time when Japan was so heavily Buddhist that those were sort of forbidden areas and yet necessary. And so they got marginalized because society still wanted those leather goods and they still wanted to eat meat sometimes, but they didn't want to admit that they liked the fact that somebody else was killing the cows for them. So those people got marginalized, and to this day, they're still discriminated against. There are still people who, because of being Burakumin, they went out of their way to officially change their last name so that they couldn't be readily identified as Burakumin, just to avoid some of that prejudice and getting pigeonholed. And there are people who will do like background checks on the family of their child's fiance to make sure that that other family isn't Burakumin before they'll allow the marriage to go forward.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really drastic sometimes, and they sometimes have the same attitude toward other Asians living in Japan, even if they're 3rd or 4th generation Japanese citizens. If they're of Korean heritage or Chinese heritage or whatever else, they are discriminated against too sometimes.
I heard that there was, I mean, not to say that America didn't have things like this, but a
Yeah.
law that was enacted, I believe in the 30s, that meant that if they disapproved of it, your family and your physician could apply to have you basically kidnapped and sterilized, and it was mostly used to prevent offspring from being had in marriages between Korean and Japanese people.
Wow.
And like the most recent of these happened in 1994, and later in Japan's history, it mostly got used for women who were receiving help in mental institutions, so that
Wow,
they
yeah.
would not have.
I don't know the facts of that stuff, but it's probably, you know, at least in some cases, that very well may have happened. I know that Korea and most Korean people are still angry at Japan to this day. They have good business relations, they have diplomatic ties, but there's still a lot of anger and prejudice on both sides because the Japanese soldiers in particular and the government treated Korea and China and Taiwan very poorly during their occupation of those areas. So, Yeah, they occupied all of Korea, south and north. A huge swath of China, nearly half the country of China, and all of Taiwan before and during World War II. And they were encroaching on the Philippines and such once we got into the fight, and, that's why we had so much fighting in those areas. And they were trying to basically take over Asia and be the Asian equivalent of the British Empire. So we've got time for like 3 more. Cotton. Cotton. As in curtain. Cotton. Remember I said any of the sounds tend to transfer to Cotton.
So what about cotton?
Cotton. They actually have a Japanese word for that because that's a plant that they had access to. They might sometimes do koton in katakana, but men is a Japanese word with a kanji to it that means cotton. Mary. The name Mary, yes. Okay. Britain, England, yes.
I also have a question.
Hi.
If it's Igirisu, why is it ego?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure where they got Igirisu from because it doesn't really sound that much like England. But the E in ego is a kanji that was associated with England long before they started using katakana for that purpose. Eikoku was an archaic term for England, and it comes from the e sound coming from the e in England, basically, the e. And they did the same thing with America. They have a kanji called beikoku. The bei is from an older kanji compound that was like several kanji phonetically spelling out America, and the bei is another pronunciation of that same kanji, and so they use the A from ego for English language. They also use it sometimes as a sort of shorthand in things like newspaper headlines. So if they're talking about like Japan-U.S. relations or Japan-British relations in diplomatic ties or whatever, they'll use the shorthand single kanji for that other country, and they'll use the nichi from Nihon, just the ni from Nihon, and the a, for example, from England to say nichi-e kanke would be like Japan-British relations. Say the Prime Minister of England is visiting Japan and it's a big headline or something. So they have a kanji, single kanji shorthand for a lot of the major countries in the world, and that gets used when they want to just take up one space instead of having to spell out America or Igirisu to take up 4 spaces. Okay?
I was curious about something, it's sort of along the same lines.
Yeah. And it is past our time, so if somebody needs to leave, you can leave, but I'll still answer your question.
So stuff, they have like Go and Gene for like language and nationality specifically. But say if you wanted to describe something like food or something that's from another country, is there something for that?
There's a
or
word
would you,
for
like,
cuisine
know?
that you can add.
But just
instead.
stuff in general, like maybe like clothing, like basically anything other than.
Try to export to another country.
Just like some sort of item that originated somewhere else. Would you
Yeah,
use like no, or is there
You
another
can
suffix
use
for that?
no, like Nihon no things, Nihon no omiyage would be souvenir of Japan, Nihon no enbitsu, pencil from Japan. So you can use the country name plus no. You could use, there are specific terms as well for a lot of those things, so you can use, like Nihon ryori means Japanese cooking, cuisine.
And you just pop any other language.
Yeah,
country
you can
would
put
use in there.
America ryori to say American cuisine, Italia ryori for Italian food, Chuka ryori is Chinese cooking.
Do they have that for like most things, or do they end up having?
They use no a lot. It depends. Certain kinds of categories, they have a specific specific word for, and then other times they don't, and so they just put no, and then, yeah.
What's Japan's political, like, if you
Their
were,
system,
but if you were to say, compared to America, like, libertarian, independent, Republican, if
They-
the majority of their population? Or does it
they
depend?
usually end up with a coalition government, they have a parliament, it's,
Okay.
they call it the Diet, which is off of the German system, but it's closer to the British system than ours.
Okay.
And so whoever their prime minister is based on whoever's in the majority in their parliament and in their diet, and that usually ends up being a coalition because I think they've got a conservative party and a more liberal party, and I think usually neither one of them can get enough of a majority, so some of the other smaller independent parties have to kind of ally with the side that's got the largest number of votes and that becomes enough to make the majority and pick the prime minister.
Do they have like touchy subjects, like abortion
yeah.
and things like that?
I don't know that abortion is that big a deal to Japanese people necessarily. I'm not sure why. I think, yeah, like I said before, the Christian population of Japan is less than 1% of the population. The vast majority of people in Japan actually don't identify themselves as being particularly religious.
Okay.
If you ask people, what's your religion, they'll say, oh, I'm not really religious. If you ask them what they do for holidays, on Buddhist holidays, they go to temples. On Shinto holidays, they go to shrines.
Okay.
If there's a funeral, it's Buddhist. If there's a wedding, it's either Western style or Shinto.
Okay.
I just,
So
did
there-
I miss anything on, I had to wait for my mother, because she,
Yeah,
very strict
we
schedule.
were going over katakana before you came in,
Just
so
the chart and stuff.
the chart and, stuff like that.
So I'm sure it wasn't absent.
I noted that you're here, I haven't even done the attendance
Oh, okay.
computer yet,
All right,
but
thank you.
you're here, so.
So you can think it's considered racist for someone who's not Buddhist or, really any religion to go to a temple or to go and pray, like,
No, Japanese people don't mind it.
Right.
Most temples and shrines in Japan are tourist attractions too, because they're beautiful.
And you gotta get money to keep it up somehow.
Right, and well, I think a lot of Japanese people accept that outsiders think of those places as beautiful too, and they're flattered when you like it and want to go see it. You want to act respectfully, you want to dress respectfully. I mean, some young Japanese women these days go in clothes that would not have been acceptable when I was a student there, but as a foreigner, you will probably want to err on the side of being a little more conservative in how you dress when you're going to places like that, so.
is it offensive to wear a kimono?
No.
Okay, yeah, because my grandma always she used to tell me, you should wear a kimono, because she was completely Japanese.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if that's okay to do.
No,
like,
it's
to
fine,
go
yeah,
to
I
a
own
shrine.
a bunch of kimono,
Yeah.
and I used to always wear one of the cotton yukata for the summer festivals.
Yeah, yeah.
And, if I'm gonna be dancing bonodori, I wanna wear yukata, it's more fun that way.
Right, yeah.
And, nobody ever thought anything bad, they usually take it as a compliment. In fact, a couple of different families gave me kimono as gifts.
Oh, yeah.
I've also got some really formal, fancy ones that I don't use very often, but that I bought secondhand because the silk ones are ridiculously expensive
Yeah.
otherwise. But I used the very elaborate silk one that I have for one of my dance performances when I was taking private Japanese dance lessons, and I can't remember if I ever got a chance to wear it for New Year's or whatever and go to a temple in it. I don't know if I ever got the chance to,
That's
but,
cute.
yeah, New Year's is one of the occasions when Japanese women often do dress up in their most formal kimono
Yeah, because
and
there's,
go to a shrine to pray.
down near Miami, there's Murakami Gardens.
Yes, I love that place.
Yeah, and I know the Hatsume Festival is in the beginning of spring, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
I kind of want to go in full kimono, but I don't know if that
Oh,
would be.
I think that would be very good, yeah. And I think the Japanese people there would be very happy. They would take it as a compliment that you
Right.
like their attire that much.
Mhm, And then,
Um,
Field trip, let's go.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then my parents said if I get $30,000 in scholarship money, which is a little far out right now, but I'm working on it. They said we'll take a trip to Japan and hopefully go see my
Nice.
family, my Japanese side.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm like, ooh, I hope I know enough Japanese to like have a
Yeah.
small conversation with them.
Yeah,
or
well, you
something.
gotta stick with the classes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I have a
And,
question actually about that.
yeah.
Japanese too, like how
I
how
just,
hard is it going to be compared to this class?
it's gonna be similar level, similar
Okay.
pace.
But like I guess learning all the characters is like kind of like takes a lot
Yeah.
of time, but like because
Yeah.
I have to take a lot more classes next semester,
Yeah.
like
The-
5.
When you, when we get into lesson 3 and 4 and we start learning the kanji, you'll have a better feel for what the rest of the chapters are like, because the sheer volume of hiragana and katakana is daunting for a lot of people, but they're phonetic. Kanji is a completely different kind of thing, so you'll get a better understanding of how hard kanji is for you once we get into it, and
Yeah.
then that'll give you a better idea of what
Because I
the
definitely want to
next
take
level
Japanese
will
too.
take, in terms of your time and everything, because each chapter from 3 onwards introduces around 12 to 15 kanji per chapter. So I think most chapters it's like 14 or 15
That's not too
kanji.
bad.
So that's a very manageable number if you've got good steady techniques in place for how you're gonna handle them.
Yeah, I'm doing really well so far as far as memorizing. Like
That's good.
I sit there and I'm like keep writing the
Yeah.
kind of like over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I've kind of already got the sore
Yeah,
already done.
okay, cool.
Because I have a video, I would show it to you. Like I learned like which like kind of conversation. You know when you point to like that one, no that one.
Yeah.
I kind of learned that on through a video I watched a long time ago, and I rewatched it recently, and I was like, oh, that's helpful. I would show
Yay.
it to you, but she cusses a lot in it, so
That's okay.
so I was like, probably has best that.
On a kind of related note,
Yes.
how, like, I don't know if I'm like a quarter Japanese or eighth Japanese, betting on eighth, but
Okay.
but how do you present the idea that like you may be part Japanese, but culturally you're not at all? Because my mom
Yeah.
is part Japanese, but she was adopted by an American family, so she
Okay.
didn't grow up with any,
She didn't grow up with any of the culture. Yeah.
except for, you know, being like the center of attention for being one of 2 Asian kids in town. But
Yeah. Not the kind of
yeah.
growing up with the culture that you really wanted, right?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.